Hello everybody, welcome again to another short video as we continue our series on leadership. What are the skills that you need to become a leader? What are the skills that you need to become an incredibly proficient and efficient and successful leader? In this particular video, what we're going to do is to go through what I consider the fundamental, as one of the many, but one of the fundamental elements and indeed pillars or platforms or foundations of leadership. And that is communication. You see, without communication, there is nothing that you can do successfully that will allow you to get further than where you are today. I heard once, a wise man speaks when he has something to say. A foolish man speaks when he wants to say something. There's a difference, a little nuance, but you get it. Some people don't speak much as leaders. Some people, by their very presence, communicates what it is that they're trying to say. But for the majority, unless you get into somebody's head, unless you get into my head as a leader, there's no way you're going to understand what it is I'm thinking or where I want to take the team, the project, the business. So when you look at communication, you say to yourself, firstly, how do I communicate? What language do I use? What body language do I use? What facial expressions do I use? What do my eyes say when people look into them? Communication uses many forms. It's not just words. It's about how you say something, when you say something, and the words you use when you say something. And of course, in between all that, the level of fluctuation of your voice, when you want to really get something across, when you're passionate about something, when you're angry, which is when you shouldn't communicate, of course. There are many different aspects. So there's a matrices of aspects to consider when you talk about or look at communication. But it is so vitally important. Now, in order to communicate successfully, you have to provide clarity. If there is no clarity in what you want to say, there will be utter confusion. As I'm sure you know, as human beings, we hear different things. Some people are more visual, some people are more mechanical in their understanding. Some people need to see the words written down, so they don't really hear what you're saying at the same time. So seeing might be different, hearing might be different, seeing something written down might be different. You'll have different individuals in your teams. And remember, it's not just about your team. It's about those above you. If you're in a hierarchy or in a company, department, team, project, and then there's a boss above you. And above the boss, it goes right the way through to the shareholders, for example, or investors. So communication is a network of aspects which are within your control and outside of your control in terms of responsibility. But what you can and do control are the words that you use, how you use them, and when you use them. So clarity is important when it comes to communication, but equally important is courage. You need to have courage. Let's assume, for example, you want to make changes in your team. Some people have to leave, some people are coming up for early retirement, some people maybe are dead wood, let's be honest, they don't fit or don't meet the criteria or the goals or objectives that you have set. How do you deal with that? Or it could be more fun in the sense of strategic, operational, technical. Or it could be as simple as, I need more money in order to drive or generate this business. So maybe it's with your banks, lenders, whatever. Could be with your suppliers as well, if you're in that sort of industry. There's a whole series of things that require that communication has to be absolutely clear. If it's not clear, it leads to misinformation, misunderstanding, and indeed can be very negative. My name is Chris Igwe. I've been developing teams, creating, growing and leading teams across international markets for over 35 years. The one thing that I've seen is, and wherever I've gone, if it's a language I don't speak, I've sought to communicate with the individuals by understanding what their communication methods are. Whatever those are, you have to adapt to it. So if you're not a great communicator, here's what I suggest you do. First of all, let's make it very simple. Let's start from the basics. Remember when you were at school? You did essays, you did reports, maybe you did debating classes, maybe you participated in different groups, maybe you're in a working group and someone had to communicate the results of that working group to others. Why don't you start out by taking a project or an idea or something, which could be personal, could be your home, or in your home, or it could be in work. Write it out and share it with someone. Ask them for their feedback. Ask them if they understand what you're trying to say. But don't just write a story. Write as if you want to convince somebody of something. You want to impose upon somebody an idea or a thought or a project that you want to take forward. Why don't you try that? There are many other examples you can use in life. Maybe you want to go on vacation. Where do you want to go? Who are you trying to convince? Your spouse, your partner, your children? Why don't you write that out and say, this is my idea, this is my project, this is what I want to do. Write it out and then speak it to them. Now, ideally, when you communicate, you want to do it verbally. You want to be able to stand up, say what it is you want to say, and get their feedback. And then as you hone that skill and ability, it gets better and better. It doesn't come easy. Not everybody can stand up in front of the class, in front of their colleagues, in front of the bosses, and speak or say something. But if you want to communicate what your message is, what you need, what idea you want to sell to them, you've got to be able to communicate. It's a fundamental requirement of business. And beneath all that, or maybe wrapped into it, depending on where you want to put it, but I put it here because one of the foundations of all that is conviction. Because if you're saying to your spouse or your children or whatever, I want to go on vacation to X place, and they're totally against it and want to do something else, how are you going to give them that passion, that desire, that commitment, that idea that that is where you want to go, and of course the why you want to go there? That's fundamentally important, to bring them over to your side. So I use the holiday example because that's easy to do. Obviously a business one is way more complex. It's way more challenging to come up with the ideas that need to be sold to another party or to your bosses or your clients or whatever. But then the part that comes in there is this vision. The vision is what holds this all together. Within the vision itself, and we'll talk about vision another time because that's a much more meaty subject to unwrap. But if you look at vision and you say, that is the direction that I want to go in, or that is the direction I want to go in, or that is the direction I want to go in, and you can explain why you want it, then others will follow. They will get it, they will see it. It's built with conviction, courage, clarity, and then people say, I get it. I want to follow that guy. I want to follow that direction. You want to take your team with you. So communication is incredibly important, a fundamental aspect of the way in which we function more and more in today's world. One thing that I do, for example, you can say, well, we don't all communicate in the same way. So maybe different generations communicate in different ways. Now that is true. That is true. But if I look through the eyes of my children, for example, the millennial children, they communicate in a way which is very different from my own. However, what I insist on whether they're millennials or younger or older, it doesn't matter. It's trying to understand what it is they are trying to say. If in words it doesn't come out so well, I then want to hear it. But I want them to hone their skills to be able to communicate to me with passion, with courage, with clarity, with an idea of where they want to go, because that transcends language. That transcends language, whether it's language in terms of different languages or style of communication. It's about being able to then hear what it is they're trying to say. So leaving you with that thought, communication very important for all of us. Let's learn, let's understand how to use that particular tool and learn more. So if this video has spoken to you, I'm delighted. You can connect with us on the link and learn more about what we're doing and the exclusive programs we're putting together. And at the same time, if you're already subscribed, firstly, thank you very much, really appreciate it. But also put on your notifications so that you know when new videos are coming out as we continue this journey of understanding and unwrapping aspects of leadership. I look forward to connecting soon. Thank you. Hello everybody, and welcome to another one of our training videos on leadership. We've been looking at what it takes to become a better leader, how to be a leader if you're not a leader yet and you want to become one. What are some of the traits and leadership skills that are needed? What are the requirements to become an even more effective leader than what you are today? So we spend time over a few minutes just to discuss various aspects that are key to leadership. And in today's, we're going to talk about possibly something that is not so thought about and not so widely considered in the context of leadership. What we're going to talk about today is servant leadership. What is servant leadership? How do you use it in the team? How do you embrace the qualities and skills that you need to have to be a servant leader? So we're going to go through all those over the next few minutes. My name is Chris Igwe. I have over 35 years experience leading, training and developing teams, which I've done across 5 different markets, primarily in Europe, Middle East and Africa as well. I hope that through this video you will acquire some better skills and knowledge and information. And if you like this video, please comment, like, share, and of course subscribe to this video channel so you receive other videos as and when they come up. And you can look at the previous ones as well. So, servant leadership. What is it? Well, as you can imagine, there are some people who disagree completely with the notion or idea of servant leadership. And then there are those who absolutely embrace it. And of course, there are those who don't know what it is or don't know how to use it. So wherever you are on this spectrum, clearly leadership has multiple facets, and there is no one single answer. So the first thing to do with servant leadership is to understand where it comes from. Where it comes from, first of all, is it's either a concept, an idea, or indeed a philosophy. And that philosophy can be seen in the works back in the day of Lao Tzu, Cicero, and of course in the Bible. Servant leadership, if at least the Bible gives you a bit of an idea, you'll understand what I'm talking about. You see, servant leadership is about your support of other people in your organization. I'll drill down into that in a minute. But let me give you some examples which I'm sure will resonate with you, and you may have other names as well. So on the one hand, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King Jr., Jesus Christ, Sir Richard Branson. What have all these individuals got in common when you look at what they do? If we take a Nelson Mandela, for example, that maybe many of us can relate to a bit more, because we followed what he has done from his imprisonment to becoming South African president and everything in between. You see, servant leadership carries various skills, various abilities and various thoughts, which, by the way, are encapsulated here. And the notion and idea of servant leadership was first brought out in the 1970s by a guy called Robert Greenleaf. And Robert Greenleaf later created the Center for Servant Leadership. And here are the things that he identified, which I think make it easier for us to follow. So servant leadership is all about enriching lives, enriching the lives of other people. It's about building a better organization, but in a particular way. It's about creating a more just and caring world. So if you look at each of these, you can say to yourself, well, this is not about me driving the team forward. This is not about me driving the business forward, although it is, but it's a byproduct. What you do is you live the authenticity of the fact that you are there to serve those in your team, your department, your company. That is your priority, is to ensure that you create a more just and caring world by enriching the lives of those in your team, your department. So that proximity helps in relation to understanding servant leadership. So it's almost like it's more about your needs and the needs of others than it is about your own team and your own needs. And if we stick with Richard Branson, Sir Richard Branson for a moment, as we have seen in the recent days, the fact that he went up into space, and he said that he had that dream, had that dream since he was a boy of going to space and taking others with him. And he made some really powerful statements around that. The fact that it's not just about what he wants to do, although that was his dream and his vision, but how that can create a better environment for other people that he wants to promote. So let's look a little bit more then into what are the skills that are required. And these skills themselves have been defined by Robert Greenleaf and others as the core elements. And some of this, for those of you who've been watching my videos for quite some time now, will understand that some of these come through in terms of what I've expressed previously. So the skills you're required to have, and I would encourage you to say to yourself, do I have these skills? And if not, how can I acquire them? Assuming you want to promote the idea and live the idea of servant leadership. So you need to have empathy, you need to have the ability to listen, you need to have the ability to heal, because healing is needed. You'll find fractions or factions within your team, your department, your organization. There will be healing that is needed. You need to demonstrate in a wider way the whole notion of caring. Self-awareness, which we've talked about before. You need to be self-aware as to what's going on, not only of yourself, but all those around you. The ability to persuade, but persuasion in an encouraging sort of way, as opposed to anything brutal. Conceptualization, your ability to see something, create an image, promote the desire, and recommend that to your team or your department. Foresight, the ability to see things in the future as well. The ability to acknowledge that there are things that you can't actually see, but you understand and you can put your finger on. So here are some of the core elements. But what I'd like to add to that is the following, in the sense that these are the actions that should come out of servant leadership. So these are actions for you as the leader, which will help engage the team that you are leading. So you need to encourage leadership. So don't put yourself forward, put others forward, encourage them to move forward, encourage them into positions of leadership. Empower others as well. Not only give them that leadership, but say, you take care of it. Check in with me as and where you need to, for them to feel empowered that you are giving them the authority to do something. Be very supportive of creative ideas and thoughts. Some people may be struggling with how to communicate this to you and the team. You need to be able to encourage that, support that, say, yeah, I love the creative ideas, love the new ideas, keep bringing it. Never say these are terrible or whatever, just embrace them, and through the caring process, you can help it to come through. You need to be able to trust others. Not something that comes automatically to many leaders, but you need to trust them, because that comes with empowering them. If you empower them, you have to trust them. The two absolutely go together. and you need to be sensitive to others in the team, in the group, in the organization. So these are elements that you, I suggest, need to work on for yourself in order to embrace and grow the notion of servant leadership, because that's really vitally important. And if you do it already, accentuate it, do it even more. Because at the end of the day, you want to get to the results. Now, it's fair to say that in servant leadership as well, most people don't think necessarily as a servant leader, oh, how am I going to grow my business? What additional sales am I going to make? What additional businesses am I going to acquire? What additional strategic decisions and choices of buying this company or that business or whatever? So anything to grow from a financial point of view is generally put on the back burner. That's not the motivating factor, because they know that if they get the people, encourage the people to see the same vision, idea and thought that they have, they show caring, they heal wounds, they listen well, they know that everything else will come together. So they are there rather like the shepherd leading the flock, making sure they're going in the right direction, and then they will get the results that they want. But the results for you, so we looked at the actions you need to take, the results for you would be inevitably, because that's what this is about, you become a better leader. That's what you want to be, a more effective leader, a more successful leader. You want to be able to address many different areas and say, yes, I have become better as a result of my servant leadership. It enables you to be more in tune with the team. What are their issues? What are their problems? How do they feel? What do they feel? And why do they feel that way? Understand the day-to-day issues. Very often, as a leader, you can be very stratospheric. You can be high up there and leave your middle managers or team leaders, project managers, or anybody else to deal with the lower level. But when you understand the day-to-day issues, you can get down in there. You can meet on one-to-one. People talk about an open door policy. What does that mean? If I have an issue, can I come to you and talk to you? Even though I'm an intern, graduate level, I've just started, but I can still come and see you as the director, senior VP, CEO, whatever. Understand the day-to-day issues and show that you understand them. Be more empathetic. I keep talking about this as part of good, strong leadership. You need to be empathetic. You need to understand what is going on and show that you understand, that you mean it. It's not just words, it's your body language and everything else. You become a better listener. We've talked about that as well in the past, how to listen more attentively and more clearly. That's a result of servant leadership, because you need to understand what are the day-to-day issues happening, what's happening in the team, how does that affect what they're doing and their performance and productivity. You become a better listener. And finally, you become a better communicator. So your ability to communicate with them, not only what you are feeling, but understanding what they're feeling as well, is so hugely important. So those are some of the elements of servant leadership. Like I say, it's not something that's talked about a lot, and it's not something that a lot of people do either. I would invite you to think about all those around you who you see who are leaders, whether in the press, the public domain, or even in your own organization. Who are those who are putting others forward, pushing the others to the front, saying it's okay, you do that. I'm there for you if you need me. But let's be honest as well. You may say to yourself, okay, that's great, but does servant leadership work in all circumstances? My argument would be, yes, it does. However, in certain situations, such as where there's been a problem, there has been a breakdown in communication, there is a business problem of a fundamental dimension, maybe a deadline wasn't met, and so on. You can't just be there and cajole the group forward, can you? That's where you've got to move to another form of leadership, which is much more decision-making, strategic orientation. But it's a skill you have to have. So even in deadlines, so for example, with Sir Richard Branson and the space rocket that created, I'm sure they hit lots of problems, lots of snags. but they had to find a way of bringing it back forward. Would he have used a different style of management? I'm pretty sure. Would he have said, guys, this is just not acceptable. We need to change this. We need to do something about it. But then he'd say, okay, what are the problems? What are the challenges? Why is it that way? Servant leadership doesn't have to be discarded when there are problems, but perhaps you need to change the approach that you take to make it more successful. So I hope that in listening to this video, it has resonated with you. If it has, please feel free to like, comment, and of course share and subscribe to this channel so you know about the other videos that we have coming up. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you. Hello and welcome again to another one of our training videos. We've been following through leadership, understanding what the skills and qualities are that are needed to be effective, successful leaders. The one we're going to talk about today is probably one we're all used to, one we've all experienced, one that we get tired of. It's going to be the subject today of effective meetings. I'm sure many of you, like me, have been to hundreds, if not thousands, of meetings in your life and your career. They can be terrible, they can be boring, but some can be very successful and very impactful. So today it's not just about meetings. Anybody can do meetings. We have meetings on Zoom, on Teams, we have meetings on conference calls, the telephone, for those who remember what those are, to have conference calls. Or it could simply be physical, which is really what I'm talking about today, but it could also be at a distance. If you're engaged with what we're going to talk about now, then feel free to like, to share, to comment. We'd love to engage with you and continue the dialogue around this. Subscribe to the website, to the YouTube videos, and really share with us in this journey. My name is Igwe. I have 35 years plus experience of creating, growing, and leading international teams across different countries, lived in 5 different countries, and worked with teams across Europe, Middle East, and Africa, as well as those in the US. Effective meetings. The way we're going to look at this is through before, the during, and the after. Because you see, in order to lead meetings effectively, and these are, by the way, meetings that you are going to lead. There may be meetings that other people have you can't control, although there are ways in which you can manage to have a successful outcome to that meeting as well. But I'm assuming these are meetings that you are organizing yourself. So before, and again, some of these things may seem simple and straightforward to you, but believe me, with thousands of meetings that I've seen, if not tens of thousands over my career, they do not happen in this structured manner. Once again, leadership is all about taking control, planning, preparing, organizing with a result and a focus in mind. So before you get started, you have to decide on the agenda. What is it that needs to be discussed? What are the important items? So you start with those, and then at the very end you get to any other business. So map out the agenda. The number of people who go to meetings as leaders and you just say, we'll talk about this, talk about that, and it's just a general conversation. Set out the agenda, make sure that those who are going to be at the meeting, who, by the way, you will be inviting, they will be included in that agenda list. If there's anything they want to contribute to the meeting, make sure that you include them and include those subjects in the meeting. So set the agenda and you set the timing. How long should the meeting be? Now, as we all know, I hope, just because a meeting is long or longer does not mean it is most effective or efficient. It's about how you manage the process. But you want to set out the timing. How long is the meeting going to be? When should people turn up? And the final one is information. The best meetings are the ones where everybody is prepared. So if in setting the agenda there are those who are going to speak, or you have a topic on there that you want to communicate about, and there is information, data, surveys, whatever it happens to be, make sure that information is circulated before the meeting and expect everybody to have read it. So you don't get to the meeting and then start sharing and discussing and wasting valuable time. So set the agenda very clearly, set the timing of the meeting itself, and it could be regular meetings also. So if it's a regular meeting, make sure it's in the calendar. If it's a one-off, that's okay as well. And then you have the information that needs to be shared. Once you've done all those, we then come to the other important section. So what do you do during the meeting? Remembering that you're focusing on efficiency, effectiveness, clarity. Well, firstly, you are leading it, okay? If somebody else needs to speak at a certain time, that's okay. But it is your meeting, you called it, you are leading and driving it forward. So you need to establish your authority. You need to establish that they are all there with the purpose of discussing whatever the agenda items are and coming out with a conclusion at the end. Here by timing I mean not only start on time, but it also means finish on time. But in between that, if people are contributing to the agenda or there is an item to be discussed, you give it the appropriate amount of time to be discussed. If there's a really important strategic conversation, for example, you don't put it at the end and you don't give it 5 minutes. If it's an hour's meeting, let's say, the strategic conversation or the business or financial should always be way up at the beginning because they are the important elements and then they work down in order of priority. I know some people sometimes flip that, that's okay. Maybe they want a bigger discussion later on when some of the more formal things have been discussed. That's up to you to decide. You are leading it. Timing is important. Timing is also important from a leadership point of view for people to turn up to meetings on time. It is not acceptable for them to be late, and it's even worse if they don't let you know. Little anecdote, in one of the companies I worked with, my team had a difficulty getting in for the Monday morning meetings. It went from 8:30 to 9. They couldn't do 9 either, so eventually I made it 9:30. At 9:30 or 9:15, 9:15 I expected everybody to be in the room, and those that weren't, and one or two over time tried it, they weren't, and they lost out on business for the rest of the week, which was part of their financial benefit. They understood that, it hurt them. Those who did it didn't do it again. It still happened from time to time, but you set what your expectations are of your team, and punctuality is really, really important. It shows respect to you, it shows respect for others, and it shows respect for themselves as well. Engagement. During the meeting, it's important that everybody is engaged in the conversation. They're not invited there just to participate. All those who are there have a role, and you want that role to be fulfilled. There are those who are going to be more chatty. There are going to be those who are maybe aggressive. There are going to be those who talk a lot. There are those who don't say much. You want to make sure, because even those who don't say much, you want to make sure that they are engaged in the conversation. You do so through the moderating process. You are moderating. You're leading, but you're moderating. Moderating means that you are ensuring the fluidity of the meeting. So those who are quiet, but you know they have something to say, you make sure they say it. You make sure they're engaged. The one thing you don't want to have happen is this meeting is held and those who felt they wanted to say something and not able to or didn't, and then they come and moan and complain after the meeting. It has to get said in the meeting. In terms of moderating or indeed in leading, one of the important things is note taking. Notes need to be taken. Now, I've often had the privilege of my PA being in most of the meetings, not all necessarily. Whether it's your PA or somebody else you delegate to, somebody takes meetings so that you can talk. You take your own notes, you take your own meeting notes as well, but maybe the big points and items, and whoever else is taking the minutes picks up on the process, the systems, the information being shared. So that's all very important. Leading, that's your role, you have to own it. Timing, very important, start, finish, and in between. Engagement, make sure everybody's committed, talking, discussing, and moderating, looking at body language, looking at those who are engaged, those who are not. And by the way, in here, of course, mobile phones. Mobile phones either have to be on silent, preferably. Vibrate, not so good, unless they put it on a surface that doesn't vibrate the table. But they're not to consult their phones whilst they're in a meeting. That has to be an absolute rule. That's during. And then after. After is maybe a little simpler but equally important. People think, oh, the meeting's happened, we all go off in different directions, and that's it. Well, no. You need to make sure the minutes are drafted, come out. You, as the leader, review those draft minutes, make sure it is what was discussed. You have action items against each one, so who was supposed to follow through on something, make sure they are included in the minutes and they know. And then circulate the minutes, of course. Make sure everybody who was at the meeting gets a copy, and it may be that your boss, for example, or someone else gets copies of those minutes. So the circulation of the minutes are critically important. Very often this gets left out, and this is mayhem afterwards, where no minutes are taken, not everybody is informed of the same thing, so everybody takes their own notes. That is a disaster waiting to happen. That allows people the freedom not to complete the actions that they were supposed to carry out, or pretend they didn't know about it. So once the minutes are out, you then review and monitor the actions, because with the minutes, generally, those actions have dates or times. It may be to be done by the next meeting, that's okay. But it may be this needs to be done in between, or somebody didn't have information at the meeting, they need to bring it later on. Actions need to be monitored, followed through, and checked off, and you do that. That's your role as well, to review and make sure the actions have been completed effectively. So that is the process. It's about what you do to prepare, so the before, the after, during, and the after. Now the key thing about meetings overall, which I want to finish on, is put it through a process in your mind. Like I said, we are over-meetinged. It's not like we need another meeting, but some are absolutely necessary. I know some people who have very short meetings, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You've got to be talking fast and maybe more regular meetings, or maybe you trust those who are doing it to get the jobs done and therefore you don't need to follow through as much. But let's just assume in a standard work environment or business environment, meetings are needed to make sure everybody's on the same wavelength. So you have to ask yourself, what is the necessity for this meeting? Does it have to be a meeting? What is its purpose? What do you want to achieve through that meeting once you've had that? What is the optimal or ideal length, both based on your timetable and schedule and based on other people and maybe those who travel? So when are they all going to be in the same place? And then inevitably, and really important, who needs to attend? The number of meetings that many of us have been to, and there are maybe 10, 20, 30 people on the phone. With these Zoom and video calls these days, you have way more people on the calls. Who really needs to attend, and not just attend, but contribute in the meeting and to execute whatever it is afterwards. So this is the kind of test you need to take through in your mind, and then you'll be surprised the number that will be reduced significantly, because maybe there is no necessity. Maybe an email, a memo, a quick phone call, one-on-one, yes, okay, it takes more time, but it saves everybody time. You can get it done. The purpose, what is the outcome that you want to achieve? Why does it need to be all those people who are called together to be in that meeting? And then, of course, how long? So if any of this has spoken to you, which I hope it has, on effective meetings, then please, as I said, like, share your comments as well, because many people have different ways of doing successful meetings. Love to know what your thoughts and ideas are, and most importantly, also subscribe to our channel so that you can follow our other videos that come through. And we appreciate your time, appreciate your listening, and look forward to connecting with you. Thank you. Hello everybody and welcome to another one of our training videos. In this particular one we're going to be looking at problem solving. Now in leadership it has to be said, as in many things, but leadership in particular, the ability to solve a problem is probably one of your most valuable skills. We've looked at other skills in various videos. This particular one is going to focus very specifically on problem solving. Because you see, as a leader, the bigger the problem you solve, the bigger the result and the solution you provide, not only within your organization and to your team, but also in terms of your clients, your customers, your future business. It's all about solving problems. If you're not solving a problem, you're just managing, which is a totally different field from leadership. Now, if you've been following our various training videos, you know the approach. We'd just love you to like, share, comment, and of course subscribe to this particular channel so you receive other videos that we will be sharing. My name is Igwe. I have over 35 years experience working across 5 different markets and also within Europe, Middle East and Africa, creating, growing and leading teams within different businesses. So problem solving is key. And I'm going to share with you what I see as 6 specific strategies for you to approach problem solving successfully. Problem solving is not just about dealing with an issue there and then, but it's about leveraging that for you in the future as you continue to grow your leadership skills. So what are those 6 things? I'll just share them with you and then we'll delve a bit further into them. So we're going to go through research, understanding the issue, assembling the team, the stakeholders, we'll talk through that, sharing the love, as I call it, and leveraging the problem. So the first one, let's talk about that. And this is often where leaders fall down. This is where the problem literally exists initially, because leaders often forget or choose not to do the research beforehand. And what do I mean by that? It's about acquiring as much knowledge, information and data as you possibly can surrounding this problem. It's sort of a due diligence, if you like. You can look at it either on the basis of what you know going into tackling that problem, or what you are given, what information is shared with you. So for example, if a client wants you to address a problem or solve it, or you've just been hired by a business, what they will be doing is probably providing you with information, data, maybe research documents, maybe assessments, maybe reviews, maybe whatever. So you will have to look at all that information which is first gathered. So that's the first stage, is the research is about gathering as much data and information, which could be from people within the organization, and it could be from people outside. It could be your own independent research and gathering of data and information. And remember, this is not just about written documentation. It could be who, so people. Who are the people that you need to acquire knowledge and information from to be able to address that issue? It could be financial. You need to know what the business plan looks like, the budget, the P&L, all those sort of things. It could be anything broader than that as well. But you've got to do, first of all, the research. And after you've done the research, then it filters into this, which is understand the issue. So you've got all this data and information. You then have to say, what is the problem? Try and understand the problem. But again, don't do it from your own theory or your own ideas. You haven't got to that yet. You're still in the stage of, I've got the information, I now need to understand the issue. And the understanding of that issue comes not only from what you're starting to see, but what others are telling you as well. So you'll continue to interact and connect with individuals who can help you to understand what the issue is. Because remember, it may not be short term, it could be historical. So you need historical knowledge and information from those who've been in the business or around the business long enough and before the period you're supposed to be looking at. So that's the second one, understand the issue. Then the third one is assembling the team. Now, this is one where leaders often fall down. We have egos. We believe that we can move mountains on our own. We've been brought in, or we're dealing with or tackling a problem. We feel that we can handle it ourselves, but no. You have to stop and say, who are the key strategic individuals in my company, in my team, or maybe from external consultants, advisors that I need to pull in to help me to really get to the bottom of it. Because you probably don't have a full financial background and the ability to read and understand margins, P&Ls, insurance, all sorts of components that maybe build into the problem that you don't know about. You're not an HR person, so you maybe don't know the subtleties of employment contracts, local laws, international laws, etc. How do they all fit together in order to enable you to come to a solution later on? So assembling the team is really important, and you need to set your ego aside so that that can happen in order to solve the problem. The stakeholders. What do I mean by stakeholders? Well, on the one hand, the stakeholder could be the client. It could be your boss. It could be a shareholder. It could be some other part of the organization. What I mean by that is those who have, if you like, commissioned you, or those who are keen to know the answers to the problem. You have to engage with them. Firstly, what do they want? What is the outcome that you believe they're expecting? They may not know, which is okay. But think about it. If you haven't engaged the stakeholders early enough, and you go through this whole process, and you come out with a solution, and you think, wow, fantastic, I've done it. But maybe you haven't answered the precise question that they wanted to know. But also, through that, what you're doing is you're engaging them. You're sharing with them sound bites or snippets so that they know that you are on track. And you're also subtly demonstrating your skill set, your knowledge, your leadership, your ability. So you want to tap into that and use that to feed off, to make sure you're going in the right direction. But stakeholders are really important, because if it's a project that runs for weeks or maybe months, imagine you get to the end after 3, 4, 6 months. You've solved the problem as you see it, but you've missed a critical piece. Not only does your credibility go down, but you've wasted all that time. So make sure that you feed in and tap in regular updates, communication, understanding who and what the stakeholders may need. And then in this phase between that, my assumption is the problem has been solved or resolved, or you've made the report to whoever. And I talk about share the love. What I mean by share the love is very often our egos are way bigger than they should be. We all need ego as leaders. We need ego to drive us, but the right kind of ego. Often when you've done a report or summary or a presentation, you're standing up there in front of the board or the client and you're communicating the solution to the problem. It's very easy to forget those who, in this assembled team, you haven't cited as being a part of it. You go to the I, me, my solution, as opposed to our solution, our recommendations, my team, how we did it. It's about language, which is very important, because as a leader, you always want to make sure that you embrace those who are in your organization, your team, your company, who have contributed to the solving of the problem. Because 99% of the time, you can't solve a problem on your own. You need external resources and help. So share the love, show people that you care about what they've done, the contribution they've made, and how important it is to you. Going forward, you would have bought their loyalty. They will be motivated to support and serve you in the future. And then the final one is leverage the problem. So leverage the problem that you have solved. And what I mean by that is, as a leader, you've always got to be looking, assuming that you have a career path or a growth path for your company and your business. You want to see how all these things are going to take you further. And so you leverage the problem through the solution that you've provided. And being very specific about it, what it means is, for example, in my case, I've had the privilege for the majority of my career of being called by headhunters. They called me to look at another company because another company was searching. The other companies were not looking to hire me or anybody else in my position just because they like my good looks, my handsome face, the way I speak. No, they're hiring me as any other hiring to address and solve a problem that exists in that organization. And by so doing, you can leverage your skill in solving the problem by making sure that not only have you got knowledge and clarity about the problem, but also how you solved it. So what was the problem, what was the solution, and what were the steps in between that you took, so that you can communicate that to another company, a client, a new business development, a new business opportunity you're looking at, maybe to your financial institutions. This is what the problem was, this is how we solved it, this is why we're fantastic, or this is why I'm good at what I do as a leader. So you always continue to leverage that. So those are the 6 things. Research, understand the issue, assemble a team, who are the stakeholders, share the love with your team, and leverage the problem. And I'll wrap that up by finishing to say that in one particular company that I joined, I was the 4th managing director in 5 years. So clearly a real problem, a real issue. And I went through exactly those steps before I was hired by that company to ensure that I knew the problem. I'd already done my due diligence and research before we closed the deal and I signed to join. And when I was in the company, I frequently referred to my boss, the CEO, Global, in order that he understood what I saw, what the problems might be, and get his input early enough for me to then put together a mix that made sense. I was there, solved the problem, and then I moved on to other pastures. So problem solving is really important. The bigger the problem, the bigger the solution you provide, the greater your credibility and skill set going forward. So if this video has spoken to you, thank you for watching, and I would invite you please to like, share, and if it has resonated sufficiently, stay connected with us and subscribe to the site for when new videos are coming up. So thank you very much. Hello everybody, and welcome once again to this training video. We've been looking at leadership and the very different and important aspects of leadership. Today we're going to come up against one that is, I suspect, one of the most difficult for the majority of leaders. It's the most challenging and requires perhaps the greatest skill, both of listening and acting. But it's such an important skill because, quite honestly, your leadership is on the line if you cannot handle this particular skill, if you cannot embrace it and use it effectively and efficiently, sensitively, and with appropriate care. Because your team is going to be looking at you to see how you behave, how you deal with it, and how you resolve it. And that issue is handling conflict. How do you handle conflict? Well, maybe let's start with something simple. Those of us who are parents, we know what conflict is. Either we've been part of it with our siblings, or we've had to deal with it as parents. Now, handling conflict in a family environment has some tools that are fantastic for later life. But trust me when I say that leaving your home and going to the office is light years away. It's light years away because Firstly, you are dealing with adults. So whether you run a small business, you're head of department, you're a C-suite individual, top executive, whatever your role, maybe it's a team or a project that you run, how have you dealt with conflicts? How have you handled them? Have they been successful? Have they been disastrous? Well, my name is Chris Igwe, and I'm a global leader in the retail real estate sector. For the past 35 years across different countries, I've experienced, but created, developed, grown amazing teams. And through those, inevitably, there have been conflicts. There have been situations to handle and problems to deal with. So we're going to delve for a few minutes into how you handle conflict. Now, I don't know if any of you remember, those of us old enough to remember, a fantastic movie which was called The Negotiator, with Samuel L. Jackson and Kevin Spacey, both of them hostage negotiators. Now, the movie itself is fantastic. I won't steal the story, but I recommend that you watch it. But the key thing for me there is the word negotiator. Spacey had to use all his knowledge, insights, ability to listen, to discover who, what, where, how, why, and find a solution to what was a very complex and literally life-threatening situation. Handling conflict is about negotiation. It's not about negotiating with clients or maybe with your team internally to get them to do or perform in a certain way. It's not the fun side, as it were, of what we do as leaders. It's often the side that could break you. Now, the one important thing to remember in any handling of conflict, the very important fundamental, is essentially you have two people. It could be more, but generally it is two people who have a problem. It could be more in the sense that there could be one individual in that team or that department that is causing mayhem by his or her behavior. But let's remember, fundamentally, conflicts arise out of ego, jealousy, lack of promotion, lack of conformity to a certain way in which the business should be run, economic aspects, maybe competing for revenue, sales, bonuses, and a whole host of others in that line. So conflicts are generated by human beings interacting, often in a way that is rather aggressive, and one or the other tries to impose his or her law, as it were, on the others. Now, it could be as a leader you say to yourself, let them figure it out. I don't want to, I don't need to. That is escaping the inevitable train wreck that is going to happen, because it will. Not only between those individuals, but also with the team or department and how they see you as a leader. So what are some of the things that you need to remember? Well, the first is you need to take time. Set time aside to deal with the problem. You can't do it in between meetings, between traveling, projects. There's always something going on. You have to carve out in your agenda time to deal with conflict. And I'm going to give you some very specific aspects. Now, these aspects are pretty straightforward, but they require some delving into. The first is ground rules. You have to establish the ground rules. So before we do that, if the problem has occurred, you have difficulty between a couple of individuals. We'll make it two because it's easier to handle. Right up here would be set up a meeting. So you set up that meeting, you bring the individuals into the meeting, and before you start the meeting, you set out the ground rules. You basically want to acknowledge that there's a problem, there's an issue between the two parties. It needs to be dealt with, and to be dealt with efficiently. The process in this meeting and how that's going to roll, and then what you want afterwards. So you set that out so that everybody understands what the rules are. The next one, which is really important, is you allow each person to speak. One person speaks, another person speaks. And as far as the ground rules are concerned, you remind them that when one is speaking, the other doesn't speak, just listens. Each person speaks and says what the problem is, how it arose, and maybe some examples. It's important that you hear how, when, and have some examples, because that will then give you an idea of, when the other person speaks, whether they have a different concept of the conflict. Allow each one to speak. You're just facilitating this process. This is where you come in. You then repeat what you've heard them both say. That's vitally important. Why is it important? Because it's easy to be listening. And if you're not a great listener, in other words, you're getting really down to the subject of, your mind is not wandering, you're trying to focus on what is being said. If they have both spoken and you have missed something, it's important that you repeat. You repeat what you heard each one say. And then, and here's the key thing, you ask each one, have I understood correctly? Have I understood correctly what you have just said and what I believe the problem is? If the answer is yes, you've heard correctly, it's fine, great, you move on. If it's not what they wanted to say, ask him or her, whichever or both, to repeat it. And then you do the same thing. You must make sure that this circle is fully completed before anybody leaves the room. And then the final point is you suggest a solution. Maybe in that meeting, you've already got a solution, in which case you air it with them and get their buy-in, as it were. If there isn't a solution, you say, we will be able to resolve this problem, and either you have to go away and think about it and come back, or you can suggest some thoughts during that meeting. Now, for this to all flow, the thing is you have to have done your homework. So your homework is basically understanding the problem, understanding where you believe it arose, why you believe it arose, and equally importantly, if you have a PA or a trusted individual in the team who you know is very confidential, ask him or her. They will give you insights. I used to have my PA give me information and insights so that I could bear in mind maybe aspects I hadn't seen or they hadn't shown me or wouldn't show me during this process. So once you've gathered all the information, you can then make a decision around how that should be resolved and in what time frame. So that is a very important process in handling and managing conflict. Now you might say, well, that's great, but does it work? I will say it works most of the time. As I said, you're dealing with people. We are complex beings. Just when you think you've resolved something, it may not work. I've had situations where two managers in a department were going at it. We had to figure out a solution. It didn't work in the end. One person decided he was going to leave. I've had a secretary who wanted more from her role in the team and wasn't happy with the fact that we couldn't change much, but she had to adjust. She eventually left. I could go on. There are many other examples. But probably for me, the one that's stuck and sticks most in my mind, that you can't resolve everything, but then you have to find a way in which you can deal with it, was when I specifically had a conflict with an individual in my team. She was a brilliant chief designer. We were working on a very complex project. I'd been brought in by the chairman, who hired me into what was probably the European number 2 in that sector in the industry at the time. Because I was parachuted in and the other guy was moved to another role, she wasn't exactly thrilled. I didn't know her, she didn't know me. But I needed her and she needed me. We had to find a way to work together in the best possible way. Now, bear in mind, I tried everything to bring her over to my side, as it were. We had, I think it was just one lunch in the end because she wasn't up for lunches to discuss anything. I gave her flowers for her birthday. I gave her boxes of chocolates when she did a great job. None of it melted her heart or broke her down. I soon realized that there was nothing I was going to do to change her, but I had to, or change me for that matter, to find a way to work together. But we just got to a mutual level of respect and trust. Although she never said it to me, I know that she admired what I did, because the rest of the design team I had good relationships with. But at the same time, she was absolutely brilliant, and the project we worked on is a reference in the industry. So there are some people who you're not going to win over, but you have to find a way in which you can then work amicably or as best you can for the betterment of the team and for the project. But having said that, if you do approach handling conflicts with a structured, thoughtful process, you will get to a solution and resolution. But handling conflicts is one of the great leadership skills that needs to be acquired. Not the most fun part, not the greatest part. And the consequences, if you can't reach agreement, might simply be that person or those people have to leave, or maybe you choose to move on and do something else. If this video has spoken to you and you've enjoyed some of the information noted in it, click on the link, do stay in contact, subscribe to this channel, and identify the notifications so you know when our new videos are coming up. But we certainly hope that you've enjoyed it and look forward to staying connected. Thank you. Hello everybody, and welcome to another one of our leadership training videos. In these leadership training videos, we've been looking at all the elements and components that you need to improve your leadership skills, understand how to be more effective as a leader, what the leadership styles are that are important, and perhaps more importantly, what are the qualities, traits and skills that you need. So it's about you looking at your leadership style and seeing what you can take away from these leadership training videos. I invite you, if you haven't already done so, to feel free to subscribe to this channel, but also like, share, comment, share your own insights into the different topics being discussed. Now today we're going to talk about a very big subject. In the previous training videos, I've looked at cultural diversity, and in a two-part series helped to break that down into what cultural diversity is all about in terms of leadership. Now, inevitably, the other element of cultural diversity, or indeed diversity, is inclusion, which is the topic we're going to talk about today, inclusion in leadership. My name is Igwe. I have over 35 years experience of leading, training and developing teams across 5 different markets in Europe, Middle East and Africa, where I have lived and worked. The subject of inclusion is so important and so big, but can be misinterpreted in many ways. So I'm going to give you, like anything, my version, my view. If you have a different one, please feel free to share in the comments, and we can understand and develop our ideas together. So when we talk about inclusion, I think one of the first things to bear in mind is, as a leader, it's your responsibility, it's my responsibility to ensure that people are aware of the vision. Not just the vision, but the shared vision. In other words, what I want has to be the vision that I want for my team and the people who I lead as well. So it's about having clarity around the vision to make sure that everybody understands and they are able to embrace it for themselves. Because, as has been mentioned in different leadership training videos, you are leading, developing and growing people to set them up for success. If you have that as a fundamental element, that their success is your success, then that automatically feeds into the inclusion element. In addition to setting them up for success, you are there to create avenues for individuals in the team, in the company, to actually contribute at all levels. So their own skills, their own knowledge, their own insight, to bring it all forward. That is also part of your role. And then fundamentally, it's to make space for others. And those others are maybe people you don't normally see, you don't normally connect with, you don't normally interact with, but it's to make space for others to be involved in the process and discussions. Now, there are many statistics and numbers out there, and I wouldn't invite you to dwell too much on this, but I think the principle from what I've seen and understood is that the assessment is that only 5% of leaders are actually inclusive in terms of the way research studies have been done. This is globally. So think about it for a minute. If only 5%, and it could be 10%, 15%, it doesn't matter. The point is there is a small number of people who actually understand and practice inclusion as leaders. So what an opportunity. What an opportunity for you and for me to increase that number that everybody feels, because the more you feel that you're creating something, the more people will feel included. So the ways in which you can improve as an inclusive leader, and we'll wrap it up at the end with some further ideas, is firstly, even if you say to yourself, well, I'm not one of that 5 or 10%, and I don't know how I'm going to get there. Well, the good news is inclusive leadership can be assessed, it can be coached, and it can be developed. So you're not going to be alone. This can actually be dealt with and developed, because all leaders, wherever you are in your leadership journey, need to develop. Because the key idea is really this. From an inclusion point of view, when you ask individuals in a team, in a group, one of their key needs is to have a sense of belonging. We all need to belong. We all need to be together. We all need to share. So to achieve that, you want to be able to unleash the potential of each individual. You also want to create an environment for all people to thrive. So not just one or two, not just your favorites, for all people to thrive. And to just take some of this and narrow it down a little bit, if you imagine you might be a leader who says, well, he or she dresses well, he or she talks and communicates well, he or she has a style that I like. You're then segregating in your own mind, based on your own values, people based on your likes and dislikes. And as a leader, we shouldn't do that. We should allow the playing field to be absolutely level for everybody, wherever they come from. And bear in mind, this is not even about minorities or discriminated against groups who will have an even bigger challenge in feeling that they belong. So the work is out there for all of us to create an environment where everybody can thrive. So what are some of the leadership behaviors that we need to have? Here are just a few. You need to be able to build relationships. And what that means is within the team, it is your responsibility as the leader to help others who may be on the fringes know that you can build the relationships and bring them in to make them feel a part of all that is going on. So you build a relationship with them and help them build relationships with others in the team or the department or the business. You need to recognize them as well. So recognition is important in terms of what they've done. So not just recognizing them because you can see them, you recognize them because they have done a piece of work that has been amazing, outstanding, or simply has contributed to the grand scheme of what you want to provide. So you need to recognize them, no matter how small. It could be verbal, it could be written, and it could be any other form in between. And it could be personal as well as it could be in the group. So you thank them personally, and then you can maybe thank them with the rest of the group. Developing empathy. We've talked in the past about empathy. In one of the leadership training videos, we talked especially about emotional intelligence and empathy and how you build that. So that's really important to help people feel that they belong, they are a part of the whole process. Create a social connection. And I've put in here human because it's about a human need. That need needs to be not about where people are from, what their culture, their background, their ethnicity, and so on. It's about them being recognized as human beings. And as a human being, they have a voice. So you connect that social element with them. You want to encourage their participation. And that's really important. Again, everybody has a voice and should be given a voice within your team, within your department, within your company. They should be able to bring that forward. And if you encourage participation, you'll be amazed, especially as we talked about and discussed under cultural diversity. That component of diversity brings out new thoughts, new ideas, things you never thought about or imagined, which could be the actual key moment, the key idea that helps the team to perform even better. So that's really important. And then you have to have an alignment. And by alignment here, I'm meaning that what you communicate to the team, they communicate to each other. In other words, you're setting up not only the way in which they should be working and operating, but then also there's an alignment with the strategy. Remember, we talked at the beginning about the shared vision and clarity. So the alignment comes together in the vision, which everybody is part of. So these are the leadership behaviors that you are responsible and charged to provide within the team. And then to wrap it up, you may say, well, okay, I don't have that leadership inclusion skill or knowledge or ability, so how do I go about it? As I said at the beginning, it can be taught, it can be assessed, it can be developed, and it can be coached. So I start out here with, here are a few of the things that you should consider, and I should suggest that you consider them all, in fact. So on the one hand, getting appropriate coaching. It could be within the HR department, they provide you with that. If the HR department can't or doesn't do it, which is most unlikely, then you look at it yourself. But you need to find coaching. You need to find a mentor, somebody who you look up to and you appreciate because they have done it or they've achieved it in their own life, and encourage you then to become a more inclusive leader. Equally, become conscious of it. So being aware, because leadership is all about awareness. Being aware that you lack something in that area means that you can work towards discovering more. And then you assess yourself daily. So each time make a conscious effort. Did I see so-and-so in my team or department? He or she looks a little bit on the fringe. Let me make more of a conscious effort to connect him or her, bring her into the team, give her a task, recognize her abilities, different things that you assess based on your knowledge and acknowledgement that you are now conscious of what you are doing. And then the other one is finally peer assessment. So it could be that somebody else who you trust and respect within the organization, or it could be outside the organization. It doesn't have to be there. You can, based on asking them for support, maybe talk to them about a particular thing, subject, item, matter, and then they can give you feedback on how they see you performing. So inclusion is not just about ethnicity, diversity, culture and all those things, which are very important, but as I said, I touched on it in a different leadership training video on cultural diversity. Here, inclusion is about bringing the entire team together with all their different components of where they're coming from, their knowledge, their skill, their background. But the important thing is to create an environment of trust, an environment of your voice is just as important as anybody else in this team and organization, and I want to hear it. So when you share that, you'll see yourself grow as well in terms of an inclusive leader, or a leader that understands about inclusion. So with that, I hope that I've left you some thoughts and ideas. Please feel free to like, comment and share, and subscribe to the channel. And I look forward to catching up with you again very soon. Thank you.